Hey guys, happy Hanukkah. We are officially back from our very extended break. Tons of life updates have happened since we last uploaded, so for now we're going to post just this Q&A that we filmed about 2 months ago, and it's taken this long to edit. New videos are going to be coming up every day this week in honor of Hanukkah, so we hope to share more life updates with you through that. And we're going to be doing another Q&A next week. It's going to be uploaded on Sunday, so get your questions in now. If the questions are good enough, Shmuel will even be in that one also. So yeah, excited to hearing from you and enjoy this Q&A.
Hey guys, this is Shmuel.
And Miriam, and welcome back to our channel. So today we're going to be doing part one of a Q&A about just different questions we've got about our religious journeys and what being religious means to us, things like that.
Yeah, so just for background, I grew up in a religious home and community, and after a short time off the path, I came back on the path.
And I grew up not religious really at all and became religious while I was in college. So we have different perspectives on
some of these same questions, yeah.
Becoming religious and things like that.
So yeah, number one, what it's like dealing with family.
So for me, it was kind of mixed amongst my different family members. For the most part, everyone was just happy that I was happy. They saw that it was something that I had thought out and a process I wanted to go through. But also, it's just hard. So being a religious Jew, a lot of our holidays we can't actually use electricity on, which means I can't drive to families' houses for the different meals and things like that. So I ended up spending it in a religious community and haven't seen my family so much for holidays since becoming religious, and that's really hard for them and really hard for me as well. But for the most part, everyone's been very positive.
Yeah, I think the hardest part from your side was just getting married. You know, in the secular world, it's a lot more normal to get married when you're 30, 35. To get married at such a young age.
I was 22, it wasn't that young.
Yeah, but people felt like, why are you rushing? Slow down, take your time.
We also only dated 2 months.
Yeah, and from my side, it was very interesting because when I had gone off the derech, as they say, my family just treated it like normal. Nobody really changed their outlook towards me. You know, that I was still invited to all the Shabbos meals and the holiday meals. Yeah, and when I came back on again, it was just normal. You're back in the fold. Nothing changed. Nothing's different. Question number two, which fits in the same vein, is what it's like dealing with old friends. How your relationship changes with them and how they may look at you, which is a very common occurrence. From my side of it, I'm not sure which from when I went off or from when I went on. So when I went off the derech, as they say, in a lot of ways, I lost contact with all my old friends from school. You know, they're all very religious and they're dealing with religious things. You know, a lot of my friends, they weren't watching movies, they weren't playing video games, they weren't into these type of things. So we just lost connection. There was nothing to communicate about. And then when I came back on, in a lot of ways, the same thing happened. Right? All my old friends who, you know, like playing guitar and hanging out at bars and things like that, and I just wasn't interested in that type of stuff anymore. So we just had nothing nothing in common anymore. You know, I was very into religious type of ideas, you know, the purpose and meaning of life, and you know, building a family and so on. And a lot of those guys were still into, you know, party like it's the last day of your life. So I don't think there was any hard feelings. It was just we just don't have anything in common anymore. So you kind of move on. There are a few friends that you know I've kept, and a few of them that became religious around the same time as I have. So you know we went through a lot of the same things. So yeah, you know it's a mixed bag.
And for me, I kind of only have to go in one direction, but most of my friends that were very close to me understood my decisions and weren't even so surprised by it. I'd always been more inclined Jewishly. I don't really know the right phrasing for that. And they weren't so surprised. That had always been something central for me. But also a lot of my friends kind of took it personally and couldn't understand my change in interests. I did occasionally do the whole maxi skirt in a bar scene, which is really awkward. But for the most part, it's just like, oh, I didn't really want to hang out with them and their boyfriend, which before I became religious, I also didn't want a third wheel, but after I became religious, it kind of became like, oh, you just don't want to hang out with boys because you're religious now, and it kind of drew a divide. And also, I would hang out in like mixed friend groups before I became religious, and something about not hugging guys really makes guys just not want to talk to you at all, which good riddance, but definitely changed the dynamics of a lot of my friendships in that way.
Yeah, I think the next question ties into this perfectly. And that's question number 3, which is meeting new people in the religious world, in the Orthodox community, and things of that nature. Maybe you want to talk about what that was like.
Yeah. So for me, it was actually a little bit interesting. I didn't become religious with a group of friends, which a lot of people do. So then they're like meeting a new community, like they still have their friends to tie on to. I kind of just did everything on my own. Like I had guidance from mentors, but not peers so much. So it was really intimidating, and I probably became religious even faster than most people would recommend, just because it was like a peer pressure type situation. Like I was with people that were completely religious or completely not, and I wanted to be religious, so I became completely religious very quickly, just based off circumstance. And an interesting thing to point out here is that in communities more out of town, with people with similar backgrounds to mine, it was a more easy meet. They weren't demanding to know my story, but then when I meet people who were raised religious and never really met someone who wasn't religious necessarily, it's kind of a mixture between like, oh wow, so what made you decide to become religious, and like wanting to use my story kind of as an inspiration for them to stay religious, just for knowing like, I guess like how terrible the other side is from their perspective. And also just like, oh, you're so amazing, you're so strong, and it's just like awkward, like don't put me on a pedestal, like I'm really like
What about like meeting like surrogate families and things like that?
Oh, I kind of just forced my presence onto someone involved in outreach in the community, and literally moved into their basement, said I'm here now, and I'm still very close with them. It's still my surrogate family.
It's super important, especially like we discussed earlier, like kind of some families that cut off their kids when they either go on or off spiritual and religious path. It's super important to build yourself a community or a surrogate family, so you're not just wandering out on your own without any support. Okay.
We've bored the baby to sleep.
Question 4: our view and the general Orthodox view of secular entertainment. Like books, movies, TV shows, music, in the non-Jewish world, non-Jewish music, non-Jewish movies, that type of stuff is like
hot topic.
Yeah, real hot topic.
And there's no one answer on it also.
Yeah.
For someone who was raised completely religious and never had these influences, it's not as much of a desire. Both of us had spent periods of our lives not like following pop culture and watching TV, movies, whatever, with no second thoughts about it. And it's a really addictive world to be a part of. Just TV's very addictive. There's book series that are very addictive and things like that. And it's hard to just quit cold turkey. I know for me, like one of my sensitivities is just like in terms of movies, like I wouldn't watch anything higher than like a PG-13 rating, and even that sometimes it's
especially nowadays, PG-13 is rated R from like 10 years ago.
Yeah, and it's just like building up the sensitivities, and like and it's not just as a shield of myself, it's also just I'm not as interested in it. I'm becoming religious. I'm growing my interest. I don't want to spend all day just staring at screens. I want to spend time of my day talking to God, and I want to spend time of my day working on myself, doing chesed, doing
acts of kindness.
Acts of kindness for others. I can't even speak English anymore. And just I have other things that I want to do that bring more value to my life than I would get from a lot of just these frivolous other sources. And that's not to say that there isn't like things that can be learned from great works of literature, but I'm not saying reading Shakespeare versus reading Torah. I'm saying reading like Hunger Games or something like that.
Yeah, and listen, the secular entertainment has changed dramatically from Beethoven's days. Most of the music, I always say this is my own personal line, that if you listen to 90% of secular music, it either has to do with sexual things, either falling in love or falling out of love and things of that nature, relationship based music, or it has to do with somebody's personal ego, how much money they have, how good of a life they're living. And that's pretty much, I just covered 90% of all of secular music. Comment below if you disagree, but that's just been my experience. It's either somebody talking about how cool they are, or about a guy loving a girl or a girl loving a guy, that type of dynamic. Tell that to her. Why are you singing that to me? I have nothing to do with your relationship, right? I'm married to Miriam here. I only want to hear what she has to say about that topic. I'm not interested in what you have to say about your girlfriend who you ended up breaking up with a week later. Like, I have no interest in that. It just doesn't feed into what I'm trying to gain out of life.
The Orthodox view is that everything that you do should be a way to connect with God, a way to work,
Or work
like
on
to
yourself,
better but you're bettering yourself to be more godlike.
Right.
So everything should be used to connect with God. So if you feel like you can watch like a show on MTV and that's helping you connect with God, then like congratulations, you're doing better than I can. But for the most part, like, you should really be like focused on what's making you a better person, and what's helping you connect with your Creator.
Yeah.
I think that's just the Orthodox view on it.
Yeah, I think that's a general Orthodox view. And also, listen, I don't know if everyone, this is a bit controversial, so let me know if you disagree. But I think as a general rule, the whole waste of time aspect of it, I don't even think this is a religious thing. I think if you talk to any of the most successful people in the world, whether it's Bill Gates or, name your successful person, Tony Robinson, they're not spending hours a day, wasting time on somebody's, made up ideas, made up fantasies, or so on and so forth. So anyway, tell us what your perspective on this, because this is definitely a controversial issue. There are a couple of different perspectives, from the modern Orthodox who are a little bit more comfortable with this, to the ultra-Orthodox who believe having a smartphone is like tantamount to idolatry. So, there's a spectrum here, and we're curious to hear what yours is.
One last question.
Science?
Yeah, let's make it less controversial and talk about science.
Yeah. What is the Orthodox perspective on science, and how that, that whole shindig is?
I think the best way to put it is just, if you think that religion and science can't coexist, either you don't understand the science or you don't understand the religion. They don't have to counteract each other. Like, rules of science can be how God is working.
Yeah. Listen, people misunderstand what they're saying when they say the word science. Most people think science means gravity or evolution or, electricity. That's what science. None of that's science. Those are all products that science produced. Science is the scientific method. It's a method of figuring things out in this world, and the rational process of what's the word I'm looking for? Reproducing things in a lab to be able to test and prove hypothesis. That's what science is. Everything else is what science has produced. Okay. Now the scientific method is just true on its face, right? When you want to prove something, you see if you can reproduce it, and that'll be a proof, evidence towards what you're trying to prove. And that has nothing to do with religion as far as a proof or a disproof or anything. It's just basic, fundamental thinking when you're trying to figure something out. Regardless of whether you're working on electricity or if you're trying to figure out what bus will get you where, you just, you make the mistake once and then you realize, all right, that definitely isn't the way to get to school. Maybe this, but right? There's ways to figure things out, and it has nothing to do with whether God exists or not. So I think that's just a fundamental error when people try and do the whole science versus religion debate. The general rule, like Miriam said, is, God created the world. He created the systems that the world operates with, and if there's some sort of disparity or disconnect between what you understand about science versus what you understand about Judaism or God, then you're making an error in one of the two. Yeah, that's the general perspective. There are definitely specific things that are major questions, like evolution, age of the world, things like that.
Even if it's a widely accepted theory, at the end of the day, it's not proven, so that can still fall into the category of like not fully understanding, because until they can prove it, that means that there's still something that isn't 100% understood about it.
Yeah, this is not our area of expertise, but I think as a general rule, that is the perspective of Judaism and science.
And that's it for part 1. Comment down below any questions that you want us to include in part 2. Like and subscribe, it helps the channel grow, and we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, bye.